A man walked into the grand building with a confident stride, his footsteps echoing off the polished floors. He was used to walking through spaces like this, places where everything shone with wealth and luxury. He ran a successful business and had the kind of money that made people look up to him. To him, life was easy. His world was full of expensive suits, fancy cars, and fine dining. There was no room for anything that didn't fit into his idea of success. As he made his way through the halls, his eyes landed on a woman in a janitor's uniform. She was busy cleaning the floor with a mop, her movements slow but steady. The sound of the mop swishing against the floor seemed to cut through the silence, and the man couldn't help but look at her. To him, she seemed out of place in such an elegant environment. The difference between their lives was clear in that moment. She was a janitor, a worker, just there to clean up after people like him. It almost made him chuckle. He stopped for a moment and raised an eyebrow. Without thinking, he spoke up in a mocking tone. "Must be nice, huh? Cleaning all day while people like me live the good life. I guess everyone has their place, right?" The words were sharp, and he could tell from the way she looked up at him that she heard the insult hidden in his voice. The woman paused for a second, glancing at him with calm eyes. She didn't flinch or show any signs of discomfort. Instead, she continued with her work. The man, thinking she was either too shy or too used to being treated this way, pushed further. "I mean, look at you. What could someone like you even do besides cleaning?" He chuckled, thinking he was above her in every way. The woman didn't respond right away. She just kept wiping the floor, as if his words didn't bother her at all. It wasn't until he was about to turn away, thinking he had won in some way, that she spoke up. "Would you like to see?" she asked quietly, without a trace of anger in her voice. It wasn't the kind of response he expected. His initial thought was to dismiss it, to ignore her challenge. But something about the way she said it made him stop. He raised an eyebrow, curious but not wanting to show it. "See what?" he asked, feeling a little annoyed but also intrigued. She smiled faintly, but it wasn't a mocking smile. It was calm, almost peaceful. With a small nod, she said, "I always carry my violin with me. If you don't mind, I'd like to show you something." At this point, the man could have laughed it off, but there was something about her quiet confidence that made him hesitate. He watched as she set down the mop and reached into her bag, pulling out an old but well-maintained violin. He wasn't sure what he was expecting, but it certainly wasn't what happened next. Without waiting for him to say anything else, the woman raised the violin to her chin, closed her eyes, and began to play. The sound that filled the space was nothing like he had imagined. It was rich and beautiful, each note flowing effortlessly, as though she had spent years perfecting her craft. The music was warm, almost haunting, and it filled the room with a sense of calm he hadn't expected. It was clear from the first few notes that she was no ordinary musician. For a moment, the man stood still, taken aback by the beauty of the music. His thoughts raced as he listened, realizing just how wrong he had been to judge her. The woman wasn't just a janitor. She wasn't just a person who cleaned floors. She was a gifted musician, someone with talent and skill beyond anything he could have imagined. The sounds of her violin seemed to speak to him, drawing him into a world where wealth and status didn't matter. It was just music, and in that moment, it was the only thing that mattered. As the music played, the man's mind began to wander. He couldn't help but wonder about the woman standing before him. She wasn't just any janitor, he realized. There was more to her than the uniform and the job she did. As the notes of the violin continued to fill the air, he started to think back on her life, even though he knew very little about her. She had been quietly going about her work, without ever hinting at the kind of person she truly was. The music she played was rich, emotional, and full of stories. It was obvious to him now that she had a history, a past filled with experiences and dreams. This wasn't just a woman cleaning floors for a paycheck. This was someone who had once had big dreams of her own. He couldn't help but think that life had dealt her a difficult hand. Maybe, at one point, she had been just like him, someone with ambition and hopes for the future, but somewhere along the way, things had changed. Perhaps she had dreamed of becoming a famous musician, performing in front of thousands. Perhaps she had once been surrounded by the same luxuries he took for granted. But now, here she was, in a janitor's uniform, quietly going about her job. Her story wasn't just about cleaning floors. It was about sacrifices, about dreams that had been put on hold for the sake of survival. The man's mind kept racing as he listened to the music. It wasn't just beautiful. It was painful almost. It felt like a reminder of how easily dreams could slip away, how life's challenges could force a person to let go of things they once loved. He started to feel a strange sense of guilt, not just for mocking her earlier, but for all the times he had taken his own privileges for granted. How many times had he judged people based on their jobs, their appearance, their social status? How many times had he assumed that a person's worth was tied to their wealth, their career, their outward success? The woman in front of him had shown him just how wrong that thinking was. As Clara continued to play, the man realized he had been wrong about her all along. She wasn't just the janitor. She was a talented musician who had once dreamed of playing in concert halls, performing for crowds who appreciated her skill. And yet, here she was, playing for him, a man who had no idea about her past, no idea about the life she had left behind. The music she played was beautiful, but there was also a sadness in it, one that spoke of lost opportunities and unfulfilled dreams. In that moment, the man understood something important. People were never just what they seemed on the surface. There was always more to them than what met the eye. The janitor wasn't just a cleaner. She was someone with a history, with talents, with hopes that might never come to fruition. Yet, despite the circumstances, she had kept a piece of her heart alive, holding on to something precious, her love for music. The sound of the violin seemed to break through the man's walls, the ones he had built to protect his sense of superiority. For the first time, he saw her as more than just a janitor. He saw her as a person who had a story to tell, a person who deserved respect, just like anyone else. When the music finally ended, the room was silent for a moment. The man stood still, unsure of what to say. It wasn't just the beauty of the music that had struck him. It was the realization that he had made a terrible mistake. He had judged this woman based on her job, her appearance, and had assumed that she was less than him. But now, standing in front of him, was a woman who had more to offer than he could have ever imagined. He didn't know what to do with the emotions swirling inside him, but one thing was clear. He had learned a lesson about humility, about judgment, and about the power of music to change someone's perspective. The woman had given him a glimpse into her world, and it was a world far more complex and beautiful than he had ever given her credit for. The man stood there, staring at the woman who had just finished playing her violin. He felt a mix of emotions, embarrassment, guilt, and a deep sense of regret. The beautiful sound of the music had filled the room, and for a brief moment, he had been transported to a different place. It was a place where money, status, and job titles didn't matter. All that mattered was the music and the person who played it. As the last note faded into silence, he was left in a state of reflection. He had been so quick to judge her earlier, to mock her without knowing anything about her life. Now, he felt small in comparison. It was as if she had opened his eyes to something he had been blind to for years, the fact that a person's worth wasn't determined by what they did for a living or how much money they made. The woman set the violin down carefully, her fingers lingering on the strings for a moment. She looked at him quietly, as though she had no expectations, no need for any kind of recognition. She simply returned to the task at hand, as though she had just played a song for herself, not for anyone else. The man's thoughts raced. He had no idea what to say. He wanted to apologize, to make things right, but he didn't know how. He had treated her so poorly, without ever considering that she might be someone with her own dreams, her own talents, her own life. The arrogance in his behavior had been overwhelming. He had assumed that because she worked as a janitor, she was somehow less than him. Now he knew how wrong he had been. He had never before experienced this kind of realization. Sure, he had heard people talk about humility and respect, but it had never truly clicked for him until now. He had always looked at people through the lens of his own success, thinking that his wealth and status made him better than those who were in lower positions. But the woman in front of him had shattered that illusion with nothing more than a violin and a few beautiful notes. As he stood there, lost in thought, she glanced up at him, her eyes calm and composed. She didn't say anything at first, but there was a quiet understanding in her gaze. It was as though she knew what he was thinking without him saying a word. Finally, after a long pause, she spoke softly. "If you want, I could play for you again sometime," she said. Her voice was warm, but there was no pride in it. It wasn't an offer made out of expectation, just a simple statement. It was almost as if she had learned to offer her talents without needing validation or recognition. She had played because it was what she loved to do, not because she wanted anything in return. The man was taken aback by her offer. He didn't know what to say at first. His initial reaction was to brush it off, to act as though he didn't need to hear more music. But deep down, he knew he was wrong. He had no right to reject her gift, especially after everything that had happened. "I would like that," he said, his voice quieter than usual. It was a simple response, but it felt genuine. It wasn't just about hearing the music again, it was about acknowledging the person who had given it to him. He had been so focused on his own world, so wrapped up in his success, that he had failed to see the richness in the world around him. The woman smiled softly, a smile that wasn't big or dramatic, but sincere. There was no need for any grand gesture of forgiveness. She had already forgiven him. She had already moved past his rude remarks, not because they didn't hurt, but because she understood something important. People often acted out of ignorance, not malice. As she walked away to finish her cleaning, the man stood there for a long time, still processing everything that had just happened. He knew that this moment would stick with him for a long time, that it would change the way he looked at the world. He had been given a lesson in humility, not through words, but through music, a gift that in its simplicity had taught him more than any lecture ever could. And as he left the building that day, he couldn't help but wonder how many other people he had judged in the past, how many others had hidden talents, hidden stories that he had overlooked. He had learned something profound, that no one's worth could ever be measured by their job, their status, or their appearance. It was something deeper than that, something that only the heart could truly understand. The man left the building that day, with his thoughts in a whirlwind. The sound of the violin still echoed in his mind, playing over and over like a melody he couldn't forget. It had been a long time since something had shaken him this deeply. He had gone through life thinking he understood the world, thinking that success and money were the ultimate measures of worth. But now, for the first time, he realized how wrong he had been. He couldn't stop thinking about the woman, the janitor, who had turned out to be so much more than he had imagined. She wasn't just a cleaner, someone to be ignored or dismissed. She had a life beyond her job, a story and a talent that made her stand out in ways he had never considered. He had judged her so quickly, so carelessly, based on her job title and the uniform she wore. Now, he saw things differently. As he walked down the street, he replayed her playing the violin in his mind, the way her eyes had closed as she lost herself in the music, as if she wasn't playing for anyone but herself. The sound was beautiful, haunting even. It had a rawness to it that he couldn't quite put into words. But it wasn't just the music that stuck with him. It was the realization that she had a life beyond this building, beyond cleaning floors. She had once dreamed of playing in concert halls, performing for people who would appreciate her art. She had a passion for music that had never died, even if life had forced her to put it aside. What had her life been like, he wondered? What had led her to take this job? Had she given up on her dreams, or was she just waiting for the right moment to return to them? He thought about how easily he had made assumptions about her, how quickly he had looked down on her without knowing anything about her past. The more he thought about it, the more ashamed he felt. But as the day wore on, his thoughts began to shift. He realized something important. This was not just a lesson about humility. It was a reminder of the power of passion. The woman had shown him something he had forgotten. What it meant to love something so deeply that you hold on to it no matter what. Even when life had pushed her into a job that wasn't her dream, she had never let go of her love for music. She still carried her violin with her, still played whenever she had the chance. It was as though the music was a part of her that could never be taken away, no matter what. For the first time, he thought about his own life and his own passions. What had he been so focused on all these years? He had spent so much time chasing after more money, more success, more recognition, but in doing so, he had lost touch with the things that truly made him happy. Had he ever done something for the pure joy of it, without worrying about how it would make him look to others? Had he ever been so connected to something that he couldn't let go of it, even when things got tough? The more he thought about it, the more he understood that he had a lot to learn. He realized that the woman with the violin had something he didn't, something he had lost sight of. She had a sense of purpose, a love for what she did, that wasn't dependent on external success or validation. She played because it was in her soul, because it brought her peace and joy. It wasn't just about the music anymore. It was about the way she had stayed true to herself, no matter what life had thrown her way. The man realized he had been too focused on outward appearances, on things that didn't matter in the end. The woman had shown him that it was the inner passions that truly made a person rich. As he continued on with his day, he knew he couldn't let this lesson slip away. He couldn't go back to his old ways of thinking, of judging others based on superficial things. He had learned something important, and he didn't want to forget it. The woman with the violin had reminded him that true wealth came from within, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of peace, knowing that he was now on the path to understanding something deeper about life and about himself. The next few days passed in a blur for the man. He couldn't shake the memory of the woman with the violin and the way she had changed everything for him. It wasn't just her music that had left a mark on him. It was the way she had handled herself in the face of his mockery. She hadn't retaliated or gotten upset. Instead, she had simply shared her talent with him, almost as if she knew something he didn't. He thought about it all the time, replaying the scene in his mind. Her playing the violin with such passion, so effortlessly, was something he would never forget. He realized now that her music had been a kind of quiet rebellion, a testament to her strength and resilience. Life had thrown its challenges at her, but she had kept playing, kept holding on to her love for music. No matter what job she had, no matter how the world around her had changed, she never let go of what mattered most to her. The more he thought about her, the more he began to question his own life. He realized that he had spent so much time chasing after wealth and status that he had neglected the things that really brought him joy. He had built his life around what others expected of him, constantly striving to impress and gain approval. But after his encounter with the woman, he began to see things differently. He had never truly done something just for the sake of it, something that brought him peace without worrying about the rewards or recognition. He had become so focused on success that he had forgotten the simple pleasures in life. He thought about the woman's music again. It wasn't just the beauty of the sound that had affected him. It was the way she played it, the way she had kept her passion alive, even when life had tried to take it from her. He started to wonder if he could do the same. Could he find something that brought him joy without worrying about how it looked to others? Could he reconnect with something he had loved doing in the past, something that wasn't tied to success or money? The more he thought about it, the more he realized that he needed to start living for himself, not for the approval of others. One day, he found himself sitting in his office, staring out the window, lost in thought. He had always been so focused on work, so consumed by deadlines and meetings, that he had forgotten what it was like to enjoy life outside of the office. He thought about the woman again, and for the first time, he felt grateful for her. She had unknowingly given him a gift, a reminder of what was truly important in life. He decided that he couldn't let her lessons slip away. He wanted to make a change, not just for the sake of making himself feel better, but because he knew he needed it. He wanted to find something he could do for the pure love of it, something that wasn't about impressing anyone or gaining status. It didn't matter what it was. He just wanted to feel the same kind of passion that the woman felt when she played her violin. The following weekend, he took a step he never thought he would. He signed up for a painting class. He had always loved to draw as a child, but somewhere along the way, he had put it aside in favor of business and success. But now, with a new sense of purpose, he felt like it was time to reconnect with that part of himself. It didn't matter if he wasn't good at it, or if he never became a famous artist. What mattered was that it made him happy, and that was enough. As the days passed, he continued to paint, feeling a sense of fulfillment he hadn't known in years. It was an escape from the pressures of life, a way for him to express himself in a way that didn't rely on external validation. And with each stroke of the brush, he realized that the woman with the violin had given him more than just a lesson in humility. She had shown him that it's never too late to rediscover what truly matters. Days turned into weeks, and the man found himself caught in a strange mix of emotions. He had begun to realize how much of his life had been consumed by the pursuit of things that, in the end, didn't matter. Money, status, and outward success had been his focus for so long that he had forgotten what it felt like to live for the sake of living. He had become a prisoner to his own ambition, always chasing something bigger, something better, but never truly feeling satisfied. But now, as he sat in his studio, brush in hand, staring at the blank canvas before him, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. The pressure to succeed, to impress, to be the best was gone. For the first time in a long time, he was doing something just for the joy of it. There were no expectations. No one was watching. No one was judging. It was just him and the paint, lost in the moment. He thought about the woman again, the janitor, who had unknowingly opened his eyes to a different way of living. She had given him a gift, not just with her music, but with her ability to hold on to something meaningful, something pure. She hadn't allowed life's struggles to take away her passion. She had kept her love for music alive, no matter what job she had to take on, no matter how life tried to change her path. It was a lesson in resilience and authenticity. The more he painted, the more he understood what she had shown him. It wasn't about having the best or the most. It wasn't about impressing others or seeking approval. It was about finding something that brought you joy, something that made you feel alive, and holding on to it no matter what. The woman had done that with her music, and now he was doing it with his art. One afternoon, as he was putting the finishing touches on a painting, he had an idea. He wanted to go back to that building, back to where he had first encountered the woman with the violin. He wasn't sure what he would say, or if she would even remember him. But he felt compelled to thank her, to let her know how much she had impacted his life. He owed her that much. He decided to visit the building the next day. When he arrived, he walked through the familiar halls, feeling both nervous and excited. As he approached the area where he had first met her, he saw her there, cleaning the floor as she always did. But this time, there was a difference. She wasn't just a janitor anymore. She was someone who had changed his entire outlook on life. He hesitated for a moment before walking up to her. When she looked up, he smiled and spoke, his voice filled with sincerity. "I wanted to thank you," he said, "for what you did that day. You probably don't realize how much it affected me, but it changed everything. You taught me something I didn't know I needed to learn." The woman looked at him for a moment, her expression soft but unreadable. She didn't respond right, away, but there was a warmth in her eyes. It was as if she had already known that he had changed. She smiled gently, nodding. "I'm glad to hear that," she said simply. The man was quiet for a moment, unsure of what else to say. But then he added, "I don't think I'll ever be the same after meeting you. I've been so focused on things that don't matter. But now I understand that it's the things we love, the things that make us feel alive, that truly matter." She nodded again, her smile widening slightly. "It's never too late to remember that," she said softly. "We all have something inside us that makes us who we are. Sometimes we just need to be reminded of it." And in that moment, the man realized that he had been given a chance to start fresh. He had learned to stop measuring his worth by external achievements and had rediscovered the joy of living for himself. The woman's kindness, her music, and her quiet strength had taught him that no matter what life brought, it was the things that came from within that truly made life worthwhile. With a final smile, he thanked her once again and turned to leave. He knew now that the path ahead was different. It wasn't about success or status anymore. It was about passion, purpose, and the simple things that made life meaningful. And as he walked away, he felt a weight lift off his shoulders. For the first time in a long time, he felt free. Over time, the man's life began to shift in ways he hadn't expected. The decision to take up painting, something he had long neglected, became more than just a hobby. It became a part of who he was, something he looked forward to every day. His studio, once a place filled with pressure to succeed, had turned into a sanctuary, a place where he could express himself without worrying about judgment or external validation. It wasn't just the painting that changed him, though. The woman with the violin, the janitor who had shown him a different way of looking at the world, had given him something even more valuable: the courage to live authentically. She had shown him that a person's worth isn't defined by their job, their wealth, or their social status. It's defined by their passions, their resilience, and the things they hold dear. And it was this lesson that had stuck with him, shaping the way he approached life from that point on. He realized that, for so long, he had lived his life for others. He had focused on what society valued: success, money, and recognition. But in doing so, he had forgotten the most important thing: himself. He had ignored the simple pleasures in life, the things that truly brought him joy, all in the pursuit of external rewards. The woman had reminded him that happiness doesn't come from how others see you, but from what you love to do. His relationship with his work began to change too. No longer did he view his business as the only thing that defined him. While he still cared about his company and the work they did, it wasn't the center of his universe anymore. He had learned to balance his professional life with his personal passions, making time for things that made him feel alive. One evening, as he stood back and looked at one of his finished paintings, he realized something. He hadn't just changed on the outside. It wasn't about how much money he had or how impressive his business was anymore. It was about finding a balance, about learning to appreciate life for what it was, not just for what it could give him. He didn't need to be the best at everything. He didn't need to impress anyone. What mattered most was that he was being true to himself. He found himself returning to the building where he had first met the woman from time to time. He didn't go there with the same expectations as before, but each time he visited, he felt a sense of peace. He would sometimes catch a glimpse of her as she went about her work, but this time there was no judgment, no pride in his heart. There was only gratitude. He wanted to thank her, to express just how much she had changed his life. But words never seemed enough to explain the depth of the impact she had made. One day, while walking through the halls, he saw her sitting quietly in a corner, taking a break. Without thinking much about it, he approached her and sat down beside her. There was a brief moment of silence before he spoke. "I just wanted to say thank you again," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "I don't think I would have found my way without you. You helped me see something I had been blind to for so long." She looked up at him, her smile warm and understanding. "You didn't need me to find your way," she replied softly. "You always had it in you. You just had to remember." He nodded slowly, feeling the truth of her words. She was right. The changes he had made in his life hadn't come from anyone else. They had come from within. She had simply reminded him of what he had already known deep down, that the path to happiness comes from living authentically, embracing your passions, and staying true to yourself no matter what life throws your way. As he walked away from the building that day, he felt lighter than he had in years. He knew that the journey was far from over, but now he was ready for whatever came next. His life was no longer about chasing status or trying to fit into a mold that didn't feel right. It was about creating a life that reflected who he truly was. Someone who valued passion, authenticity, and the simple joy of living for the sake of it. And in that realization, he felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that the woman with the violin had not only given him a beautiful gift, but had also helped him rediscover the best parts of himself.